Hey, I'm Connor from Biker's Edge.
And I'm Brock. We're out here testing 3 different bikes today to kind of figure out which amount of travel is right for you.
So for our trail bike, we use the Santa Cruz Tallboy with 120 millimeters of travel. The all-mountain bike, we use the Santa Cruz Hightower, and the enduro bike is the Megatower. Each kind of represents that class pretty well, and they're all kind of new, more modern geometry for that category of bike.
Okay, so on all 3 of these bikes, we wanted to keep them as consistent as possible. So all 3 head angles are within half a degree of each other. Reach numbers are almost identical across the lineup. And so that left us really testing just suspension travel alone with similar geometries.
So we rode all 3 of these bikes on 3 different trails back to back. We rode a climb that kind of had it all, some loose bits, some technical bits, some steep bits, and then a section of road climb. We rode an everyday flow trail that's got some jumps and berms, a drop or 2 in it. And then we rode a technical downhill, a tough, steep downhill with a lot of roots, some drops, tight corners, flat corners. You know, a pretty challenging trail, especially on a shorter travel bike. But we rode all 3 bikes back to back to back on the same trails, so we could really get a feel for how much suspension you really need. We started off on the big bike, and it climbed about how you'd expect a big bike to climb, the enduro bike. It kind of sat into its travel a little bit more. Your angles were more relaxed. It was heavier, obviously, and not quite as efficient. What do you think?
It was pretty obvious right off the bat going from the enduro bike to the all-mountain bike and then onto the trail bike, and really just noticing the weight difference between the 3 bikes. It was very clear that leaving the enduro bike onto the all-mountain bike, it felt like a bike for longer days, bigger climbs, and that's probably what I would choose if I was doing a long day on a bike.
Yeah, going from the enduro bike to the all-mountain bike, it felt faster. It just felt a lot lighter, and it accelerated quicker. And then I noticed that difference again going to the shorter travel trail bike, where it just was a lot less effort to go the same speed or faster. So we started out on the big bike, and I personally liked it quite a bit. I felt very confident on it, very comfortable. I was able to pretty much overshoot the jumps, land to flat, and feel just fine. The downside I saw was out of the corners, where the other bikes were really quick to accelerate, back up to speed out of a corner. The big bike felt a little slow. I had to pedal pretty hard to get back up to speed, where on the other bikes they kind of just did that naturally.
So for me on the enduro bike, on that first flow trail, I felt pretty weird on it. It was a tighter trail, and it just, my overall feeling was I didn't need that much travel on that trail. Felt definitely, like Connor said, a little sluggish coming out of corners, and kind of got a feeling of like I needed to manhandle the bike into corners and things like that. And then the number one thing I think that I noted was that in that rough rocky section, it felt like it actually gained speed. The rocks didn't slow that bike down. And then moving on to the all-mountain bike, the 3-pound weight difference is very apparent. I felt a lot better on that bike. I was able to get in and out of corners faster, and I still had enough travel to overshoot the jumps.
It felt very balanced. You know, it had a bit of that plow feel of the big bike through the rocks, but it also had a bit of that pop feel of the trail bike off of the jumps and in the corners, things like that. It felt fast. It didn't feel like I was slow or wallowing in my travel anywhere. So it felt like a pretty overall balanced ride. Then we got to the trail bike, and I started, it feels very fast. Your perceived speed is a lot higher. You feel like you're going faster. You're able to get a lot of air off of even like the tiniest little lip, which is pretty fun. So if you're looking to kind of play around, or you're not looking to be the fastest person out there, you just want to have fun and kind of jump off of things, it's very good for that.
I think that I had the most fun on that trail on that bike. Like Connor said, it was very, very playful. It was the bike to kind of start scanning the trail and looking for something to pop off of. That bike, I felt like I did find the limits of it. Number one, in those bigger jumps, hitting it and landing and bottoming out the suspension, and then off of one of the drops too, definitely bottomed out the suspension. Overall though, I felt like it was a really fun, playful bike for a flow trail type trail that we rode.
Moving on to the technical difficult descent. It was very rooty. There were some tight flat corners in there, some high speed sections, and some really steep stuff. And we started on the trail bike, and I felt like I did pretty well. You know, I felt like I was going fast enough through the routes, but then once things started to get steeper, that's where I started to notice I wasn't as comfortable or confident on that bike. I think a lot of it came down to the head tube angle and just a little bit less travel. It was less forgiving. You really had to be on your line. I hit a tree because I lost control of the bike and hit a tree. And I didn't hate the trail bike on that trail though, but I think you have to ride it differently. You've got to go a little bit slower, and then maybe you look for other opportunities to have fun. Instead of just going as fast as possible, your fun comes from maybe finding a little natural double, or hopping from this route to that route or something. I think you just have to change the way you ride the bike to really enjoy the short travel bike on a difficult descent.
Yeah, so for me, starting out on the trail bike on that techie descent, it was a lot of fun. It was really fun, especially the top section where it's getting into this deep stuff and it's rooty. You kind of have this feeling of popping around and changing lines and stuff like that. Once you get it down into this deep section, that's where I noticed the limits of that bike. It felt very confident until I got down there, and that's where I noticed, kind of like Connor said, the head angle a little bit, but then also just the short travel, bottomed it out a couple times there. And then going on to the all mountain bike, that one felt really good. It still maintained the light feel of what the trail bike did, but it was nice to have that little bit extra travel over the trail bike.
I felt a lot more comfortable. There was a huge jump for me with just that 20 millimeter difference in rear travel. It just felt completely different. I felt like I was able to really push the bike through the roots, through the steeps, into corners. I just felt a lot more comfortable on that bike, even though the head tube angle is the same, right? 65.5 degrees. Nothing changed there. It was just that extra travel that had me feeling a lot more comfortable on that bike. And then moving on to the enduro bike, man, it was such a good time. I had my best time of the entire day on the enduro bike on that technical descent, so I was able to ride the routes as fast as I wanted. I didn't have to hit the brakes. I didn't have to slow down once things started getting steeper. I had a lot more traction. I had a lot more control over the bike, and I just felt better.
I was riding a little bit hesitant, I think because of the previous almost crash. But right off the bat in the rough rooty section, I was gaining speed with that extra travel, just soaking everything up. On those steeper descents with corners in them, the enduro bike felt really at home, carrying a lot of speed and then braking into the corner, and where you're not really needing to accelerate out of the corner, it was doing it itself on the trail. That bike felt really, really good. Very confident on that trail.
All right, so concluding thoughts. My choice, if I could have one bike, I would take the enduro bike. I'd put a big emphasis on downhill performance, and I'm willing to take a bit of a penalty on the climbs to have that better downhill performance. That's not to say I don't climb. I rarely shuttle, I rarely take the lift. I'm climbing most everything I ride, and just the other day I took my enduro bike, did a 20-mile, 3,000 foot ride, and I had a heck of a lot of fun because the downhills were awesome. So personally, I'll take the enduro bike any day of the week, and I will ride everything I ride on that one bike. I don't know, you, Brock?
So after riding each bike, I felt really good on the all mountain bike. I was fast on the climbs. I had a good time on the descents, and I liked it for, I think, the lower weight from the enduro bike. So I think the way that I would conclude that is if I had one bike, it would be the all mountain bike. I think the happy medium is you have an enduro bike and you have a trail bike. Having two bikes makes that possible. I understand that not everybody can do that. A one bike situation, I think I would go all mountain bike, just due to the well-roundedness of that bike. It can climb well, it would handle big days in the saddle, and then as well, if you ride lifts or shuttles, it's enough bike to handle that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I guess the way I look at it is, if I can only have one, I'm taking the enduro bike or I'm taking the fun, poppy, skateboardy trail bike. I felt kind of like that all mountain bike just didn't take enough from either bike to really benefit from it. You know, I was slower through the chunk than I was on the enduro bike, but then it didn't have as much pop, or it wasn't as easy to corner as the trail bike. So for me, I want maybe one extreme or the other. I don't really care for that kind of fall in the middle, well-rounded bike. This answer's gonna suck and you're all gonna hate it, but really the amount of travel for you comes down to you. It comes down to how you like to ride a bike and your preferences. It's kind of funny that Brock and I rode the exact same bikes on the exact same trails, and we both have very different thoughts on it. You know, I'm enduro bike all day or trail bike, and I'll ride it differently. But Brock's kind of in that middle category where he wants that all mountain bike. So, you know, I feel like it comes down to you. If you want a bike that climbs well, and will do flat, mellower trails very well, but occasionally you go hit a tough descent, you know, the trail bike will do it. You just can't ride it the same. You can't plow through everything and ride it really fast like you would, you know, the all mountain or enduro bike, but it'll work, and it's a great bike for that, and it's a lot of fun. But on the other side of the coin, if you want a bike that descends really well, but you've got to pedal 3,000 feet to get to that gnarly descent, the enduro bike will work. I mean, you can pedal it. It'll pedal uphill, and it's really not that bad or that much worse than the lighter weight trail or all mountain bike. So I think it just comes down to preference and where you place your priorities with how you ride.
It was a long day testing bikes, but at the end of it, it was awesome to ride them all back to back and really notice the differences between the bikes. And I would be happy if I had either one of these three bikes, if not all of them. That'd be probably the best thing.
Take all of them.
Yeah.